This is Module 4, Lesson 2. Our learning target for today is I can interpret fractions as division. So let's take a look at our first problem. So we have 2 divided by 2. So let's say we have 2 crackers. So I'm going to draw a representation of 2 crackers. And I'm splitting those up evenly between 2 people. So person number 1, person number 2. So think to yourself, how many crackers does each person get? Each person gets 1 cracker. I can write this as a fraction by saying 2 divided by 2, or 2 halves, equals 1 whole. Let's take 1 divided by 2. So in this case, I don't have a whole cracker for each person. I start with 1 cracker, and I'm dividing that, or I'm splitting it up equally between 2 people. So what I have to do is I have to cut that cracker in half, or break it in half. Think to yourself, how much of a cracker does each person get? Well, person 1 would get half, and person 2 would get half. So each person would get 1 half of a cracker. So I can think of the division sentence, 1 divided by 2, and rewrite that as a fraction of 1 half. We can also think of this line right here in our fraction that divides our numerator and our denominator as division. Okay, let's take 1 new cracker, only this time I'm splitting it evenly between 3 people. So think to yourself, what might I need to split this cracker into in order for each of the 3 people to have an equal part? So I'm going to split it into thirds. Okay, my first person is going to get 1/3. My second person is going to get 1/3. And the third person is going to get 1/3. So if I write this as division and then as a fraction, I would say 1 divided by 3 is equal to 1/3. Because each of the 3 people is getting 1/3 of a cracker. Now let's say I have 2 crackers. So I'm going to start with 2 wholes, 1, 2 wholes, and I'm splitting those evenly between 3 people. So there's not enough for each person to have a whole cracker. So I want you to think to yourself, or on a piece of scratch paper, draw what you think you would split each cracker into in order for each of the 3 people to have an even amount or an equal amount. So I'm going to split each cracker into thirds. Person number 1 would get the first third. Person number 2 would get the second third. Person number 3 would get the third third. And I would repeat the process for each one. So person number 1 gets 1/3, 2/3 of a cracker. Person number 2 would also get 2/3. And person number 3 would also get 2 of the thirds. So we can rewrite 2 divided by 3 as 2/3. Now let's say I have 3 crackers, and I'm splitting that up evenly between 2 people. Okay, so I have enough for 1 person to get a whole cracker, another person to get a whole cracker, And then I have one cracker left over. So think to yourself, what would you need to split that cracker into in order for each person to get an equal amount? I'd have to split it in half. This part would go to person number 1, this part would go to person number 2. So if I put those together, person number 1 gets 1 whole and 1 half. I want you to think about this problem in a different way. So let's get rid of our model. And remember that we had 1 half in the way that we did it before. So I'm going to show my 3 crackers again. Okay, and in this case, I'm going to split them each in half because each person, we're going to be splitting it up between 2 people. So I can break the first one in half, the second one in half, and the third one in half. So the first half would go to person number 1, second half would go to person number 2, person 1, person 2, person 1, person 2. So person number 1 would get 1 half, 2 halves, and 3 halves. Person number 2 would also get 1 half, 2 halves, and 3 halves. And if we use what we know about fractions, I can take this 3 halves here and I can decompose it into 2 halves, which I know is 1 whole, and 1 half, which is 1 half. And if I combine this 1 and 1 half, I have the original answer that I had doing it the first way. The last problem we're going to look at today is 6 divided by 4. So let's say I have 6 crackers. And using what we've learned so far, I want you to think to yourself, what could you split these crackers into so that each person has an equal amount? Well, I'm going to split them into fourths. Okay, so then I can divide them evenly. Person 1, person 2, person 3, person 4. Person 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm going to repeat the process, dividing them evenly for each cracker. Okay, so each person would get 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4, 5/4, 6/4. And I know that I'm going to represent 6 divided by 4 as 6/4. I can also look at this by saying each person, each of the 4 people, would get 1 whole. 1 whole, 2 wholes, 3 wholes, 4 wholes. And then they would get an additional 1/4, 2/4. So if I use what I know about fractions, I can see that 6/4 is equal to 1 and 2/4. Or I can simplify it even further by saying that that equals 1 and 1/2. Now what I'd like you to do is complete your Lesson 2 problem set. Your Lesson 2 exit ticket. I'd like you to write down any questions on the back of your exit ticket that you might have so that when you get to class tomorrow, you can write You can ask those questions before we work on our Lesson 2 problem set. Your Lesson 2 exit ticket will be due tomorrow.